The manila envelope sat unopened on my desk, its presence mocking me as Thomas's words still echoed in my mind. "I'm leaving you for Jennifer, my assistant," he had said so casually, as if he were informing me about picking up groceries. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. I'm Sophie, and until exactly 47 minutes ago, I thought I was living the American dream. A successful husband, a beautiful daughter in college, and a tech startup that was about to change everything. Now I was just another statistic, a woman left behind for someone younger. My daughter Lily's voice crackled through my phone speaker. "Mom, just got a weird text from Dad. Are you okay?" My fingers trembled as I clutched the phone tighter. "Can you come over, sweetie? We need to talk." "I'm on my way," she replied, her voice trembling too. I sat back in my chair, waiting for Lily to arrive. The empty room around me felt colder than usual. The kitchen, once filled with laughter and family dinners, now seemed like a museum of broken promises. Thomas and I had spent countless nights in that kitchen, planning our future together, building dreams that now felt so distant. The dream we'd built was slipping through my fingers like sand. I picked up the manila envelope again, my fingers running over its edges, and finally opened it. Inside was a letter from Samuel, one of Silicon Valley's most prominent investors. He expressed interest in my startup. The irony wasn't lost on me. My greatest professional triumph had arrived at the same time as my greatest personal failure. The doorbell rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. I opened the door to find not just Lily, but Sarah too, my best friend. She must have heard the news through our mutual contacts. "Sweetheart," Sarah said as she pulled me into a hug. "I came as soon as I heard." Lily stood behind Sarah, her eyes wide with concern. "Mom, what's happening?" I cleared my throat and led them into the living room, the same room where Thomas and I had spent so many evenings talking about our plans for the future. Now it felt like a place of mourning. "Your father," I began, but the words caught in my throat. I cleared it and said, "Your father is leaving us for Jennifer, his assistant." Lily's voice cracked. "The one who brought us the Christmas cookies?" I nodded, trying to hold back the tears. "The very same. He moved out this morning while I was at work." Sarah cursed under her breath. "That coward couldn't even face you properly." I nodded toward the kitchen counter where a crumpled note lay. "He left me a note, said he'd send someone for his things." Lily picked up the note, her hands shaking as she read it. 6 months, she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He's been seeing her for 6 months?" "That's what he says," I replied. "But who knows? I saw them together last week at that new cafe downtown," Sarah admitted, looking guilty. "I thought it was just a business meeting." I didn't know how to respond. A part of me wanted to scream at Sarah, but I understood. I had been blind to so many things for so long. The doorbell rang again, and I looked through the window to see James, my business partner, standing outside with a concerned expression. "Come in," I called, not bothering to get up. James entered, his usual cheerful demeanor replaced with seriousness. "I just heard from Claire at the office. Sophie, I'm so sorry. Claire was Jennifer's sister. She had worked with me for years. I had always trusted her, but now I didn't know what to believe anymore." "Claire knows?" I asked, suddenly feeling sick. James nodded. "She claims she had no idea. She's devastated, actually. She says she wants to talk to you when you're ready." Lily stood up abruptly. "I need to call Dad. This can't be real." She stormed upstairs and Sarah followed her. I was left alone with James and the letter from Samuel. "What's that?" James asked, gesturing toward the envelope in my hands. I looked down at it, the weight of it now feeling heavier than before. "Samuel wants to meet," I said flatly. "He wants to discuss the investment. It could change everything for us." "That's huge," James said, his eyes wide with excitement. "Everything's already changed," I whispered. But then something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the shock finally wearing off, or maybe it was the realization that I had more to lose than just my marriage. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "Schedule the meeting with Samuel," I said, my voice steadier now. "And don't tell anyone about this yet, especially not Claire." James hesitated but nodded. Of course. What are you thinking? I looked him in the eye, my mind racing. I'm thinking it's time to show everyone exactly what I'm capable of. I picked up Thomas's note and tore it in half, starting with, "My dear husband." Upstairs, I could hear Lily's muffled sobs and Sarah's soothing voice. My heart ached for my daughter, but beneath the pain, something else was growing. Determination. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas. "I hope you understand. We can keep this civil." I deleted the message without responding. Civil? He hadn't been civil when he'd been sneaking around with Jennifer. He hadn't been civil when he'd left me with nothing but a note. The investor's letter felt heavy in my hands now, a lifeline thrown to me just when I needed it most. Thomas might have taken my present, but he wouldn't take my future. Not anymore. I looked at James, who was still watching me with concern. "Want to help me change the world?" He smiled, and for the first time that day, I felt something close to hope. 3 days after Thomas left, I forced myself to check our joint accounts. The numbers on the screen made my coffee go cold in my hands. I stared at the bank statement, trying to process what I was seeing. He did what? Sarah's voice broke through my thoughts, her disbelief palpable. She was sitting across from me at the kitchen table, her eyes wide with shock. "That's not just unethical, it's illegal." I nodded, turning my laptop toward her. "Transferred almost everything," I said, my voice flat. "Left just enough to avoid immediate suspicion. He must have been siphoning it off for months." "That son of a—" Sarah started, her voice breaking with frustration, but I held up a hand, silencing her. My phone buzzed, and I saw Claire's name flashing on the screen. I had been avoiding her calls since the news about Thomas and Jennifer broke, but now I wasn't sure what to do. I knew Claire had been close to Thomas, but I also knew she had no idea what was really going on. "I think I need to talk to her," I said, tapping the screen to accept the call. "Hello, Claire?" "Sophie." "Thank God you picked up." Claire's voice was strained, a far cry from her usual calm demeanor. "I've been trying to reach you. Can we meet? Please, there's something you need to know." I looked at Sarah, who nodded at me, urging me to listen. "Sure, let's meet," I said to Claire. "Where?" "Let's meet at the cafe in an hour. I'll explain everything, I promise." I hung up the phone, and the heaviness of the situation crashed down on me again. I wanted to yell, to scream at Thomas for everything he had done, but I knew it wouldn't help. It wouldn't change anything. Instead, I grabbed my coat and headed out to meet Claire, unsure of what she had to say, but hoping it would give me some kind of clarity. An hour later, I walked into the small cafe. The warm smell of coffee filled the air, but it couldn't mask the unease settling in my stomach. I spotted Claire at a corner table, her face pale and anxious as she looked up at me. "Claire, what's going on?" I asked, sitting down across from her. "I had no idea about Jennifer," Claire began, her voice shaky. "I swear, Sophie, I didn't know. But I overheard something I think you need to hear." She looked around nervously, then leaned in closer. "Jennifer is using Thomas. She's not planning on staying with him. She's using him to get ahead in his company, and once she has what she wants, she's going to leave him for someone else." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It was like a sick twist of fate. Thomas wasn't just the victim of infidelity, he was being played, but instead of feeling relief, all I could feel was anger. The fact that Jennifer had manipulated him like this only made everything worse. "Does he know?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "No," Claire answered. "He doesn't know. But I overheard Jennifer talking to someone about it. She's planning something big for him. And for you." "Planning what?" Claire paused, her eyes darting nervously around the cafe. "I don't know all the details, but it's not good. Jennifer's been telling people that Thomas is the real mastermind behind everything you've done in your career, that he's the one who deserves credit for the startup's success. She's trying to discredit you, Sophie." I froze, a cold chill running through my veins. Of course she was trying to take everything from me. My husband, my company, my reputation. "I'll deal with it," I said, my voice cold. "But thank you, Claire. You didn't have to tell me this, but I'm glad you did. Claire looked relieved but still worried. Just be careful, Sophie. You're a lot stronger than you think, but Jennifer's ruthless. And Thomas, he's too blinded by her to see the truth. I nodded, my mind already racing with how I would respond. I stood up, gave Claire a brief hug, and left the cafe, my resolve hardening with every step. Back at home, I sat in front of my laptop, reading through the email from Samuel again. I had never been one to dwell on what-ifs, but now it was clear that the world I had once known, the life I had built, was crumbling. And yet, in the midst of all the destruction, there was an opportunity. I had a choice. I could let Thomas and Jennifer's betrayal consume me, or I could take the opportunity that had been handed to me and build something even bigger, something no one could take from me. I picked up my phone and called James, my business partner. James, I need you to get in touch with Samuel. I'm scheduling a meeting. I'm ready to take this to the next level. I won't let Thomas or Jennifer destroy everything I've worked for. James's voice was filled with relief and excitement. You've got this, Sophie. I knew you would pull through. We'll make sure this deal goes through smoothly. The following days were a blur of meetings, calls, and decisions. It felt like I was living in two separate worlds. On one side, I had the fallout from Thomas's betrayal and the mess that was my personal life. On the other, I had the startup that I had poured my heart and soul into. And the more I worked, the more I realized that I couldn't let Thomas's actions define me. I sat down one night, going over the numbers for the new investment deal. Samuel had agreed to meet with us, and the possibility of taking the company global was now within reach. But even more than the money, I could feel the power of this opportunity. It wasn't just a financial lifeline, it was a chance for me to prove to myself that I could do this on my own. I clicked send on the email that would finalize the meeting, then closed my laptop with a sigh. It was time to show the world what Sophie was truly capable of. 2 weeks passed since I'd last spoken to Thomas. Since that day at the cafe with Claire, I'd been too focused on preparing for the big meeting with Samuel, the investor, to think about anything else. But every night when I closed my laptop and sat in the silence of my office, I couldn't help but wonder how long Thomas had been planning his betrayal. How long had Jennifer been in the picture? And why hadn't I seen it coming? I could feel the weight of those unanswered questions, but I didn't have time to dwell on them. Not now. Not when everything was finally falling into place. My startup, which had once seemed like a distant dream, was becoming a real, tangible success. The patent we had filed for our groundbreaking quantum computing interface was starting to draw attention. Samuel was eager to meet, and the possibility of turning my company into something huge was more real than ever. But still, I felt the loss, the empty space left by Thomas, and the unanswered questions. It felt like every time I made progress in my career, there was a part of me that was stuck, trapped in the past. And it wasn't just Thomas who had betrayed me. It was the whole world that had underestimated me, dismissed my ideas, and assumed that my worth was tied to my role as a wife, a mother, and a supporting figure. The morning of the meeting with Samuel, I woke up early, as I always did before a big event. I sat in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. I barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Her eyes were sharper, her jaw set with determination. She was no longer the woman who had been blindsided by her husband's betrayal. She was a woman who had learned to turn pain into power. Today is the day, I whispered to myself. The drive to Samuel's office felt like a lifetime. James had already arrived and was waiting for me when I stepped out of the elevator into the glass-walled boardroom. Samuel was there, standing at the head of the table, his sharp eyes scanning the room as I entered. "Sophie, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person," Samuel said, his voice smooth but firm. "I've heard great things about your work." I forced a smile and shook his hand. "Thank you, Samuel. I'm excited to be here." We settled into our seats, and I could feel the tension in the room. James glanced at me with a silent nod of encouragement. I knew what I had to do. I've spent years building something that I believe can change the way people think about computing, I began, my voice steady and confident. We've developed a quantum computing interface that isn't just theoretical. We have a working prototype, and it's going to revolutionize the industry. I handed over the presentation, and as I spoke, I watched Samuel's expression shift from polite interest to genuine excitement. I talked about the potential applications of our technology, how it could make quantum computing accessible to everyone, not just big corporations with specialized resources. "This is exactly what the world needs," Samuel said when I finished. "I can see why people are so excited about your work, Sophie. It's groundbreaking." I smiled, but I could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just a business deal. This was me proving to myself and to everyone else that I was capable of so much more than they'd ever imagined. It wasn't just about technology. It was about showing the world that I wasn't just a woman left behind by her husband. I was a force to be reckoned with. "We'll be happy to move forward with this," Samuel said, leaning back in his chair. "Let's talk numbers." The deal with Samuel was finalized that afternoon, and I walked out of his office with a sense of accomplishment that I hadn't felt in years. The weight of everything that had happened, the betrayal, the doubts, the insecurities, was beginning to lift, replaced by the promise of something new, something all my own. But as soon as I got into the car, my phone buzzed with a message from Claire. "Sophie, we need to talk. There's something you should know about Jennifer and Thomas. I think they're planning something big. Please call me." My heart sank. I should have known. Even though I had just made one of the biggest strides of my career, there was always something lingering in the background, always something I couldn't escape. I texted back, "I'm on my way." When I met Claire again, she looked more nervous than usual. Her eyes were wide with worry, and she didn't waste any time getting to the point. "Sophie, I've been digging into Jennifer and Thomas's activities. They're not just planning to take over your company, they've been talking to your competitors, big players in the tech industry. Jennifer's been leaking information, claiming that you've been using Thomas's research as a basis for your product. She's spreading lies, Sophie." I felt a surge of anger rising in my chest. Of course she would do this. Thomas wasn't just a fool for leaving me. He was complicit in everything Jennifer was doing to ruin me. "They're planning to announce a competing product at the next tech conference," Claire continued, her voice trembling, "and they have investors lined up." I clenched my fists, trying to keep calm. I won't let them get away with this. Not this time. The next few days were a blur of meetings, calls, and preparations for the tech conference. I had to act quickly if I wanted to prevent them from sabotaging everything I had worked for. I called in every favor I could, reaching out to trusted contacts in the industry to ensure that my product would be the one everyone remembered. Lily came by the office one evening to check in on me. "Mom, how are you holding up? You've been working non-stop," she said, her concern evident in her voice. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just a little bit of a hurdle to get over," I replied, forcing a smile. Lily had been through so much already, and I didn't want her to see how much of a toll this whole situation was taking on me. I was determined to keep her in the dark, to protect her from the mess Thomas and Jennifer were creating. "You've got this, Mom," Lily said, her voice full of belief. "You've always known how to make things work. I believe in you." Her words meant more to me than she could ever know. She was the reason I was still fighting, the reason I couldn't let this defeat me. As the conference date approached, I could feel the tension building. This was it. The moment that would define everything. Would I be able to stand tall no matter what Thomas and Jennifer threw at me? Or would they succeed in tearing everything down? I took a deep breath, looked at my reflection one last time, and whispered, "Let's do this." The tech conference arrived faster than I anticipated. The air was thick with excitement and anticipation. This was the moment I'd been working toward for so long, and I couldn't afford to let anything, or anyone, derail my plans. I had no intention of letting Thomas and Jennifer get away with trying to destroy everything I had built. I arrived early at the conference hall, my heart racing in my chest. The space was buzzing with activity, attendees networking and discussing the latest advancements in technology. The crowd was just the right mix of eager innovators and well-established players in the tech world, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the thought of Jennifer and Thomas preparing their competing product. They were already in the building, and I knew that if they were successful in their plans, it could undo everything I'd worked for. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. As I walked through the venue, I couldn't help but think back to the years I had spent in the shadow of Thomas's career. Everyone thought he was the driving force behind everything, but now I knew better. This moment was mine. This time, I was the one with the groundbreaking technology, and I was going to show the world what I was capable of. I met up with James, who had been instrumental in securing our place at the conference. "Everything's set," he said, giving me a reassuring smile. "Our demo is ready, and the investors are waiting." I nodded, trying to hide the nerves gnawing at me. "Let's do this." As I prepared to take the stage, I could see Jennifer and Thomas sitting near the front, their eyes gleaming with false confidence. Jennifer was leaning in close to Thomas, whispering something in his ear, probably discussing their presentation. I caught a glimpse of the smug expression on her face, and it was all I needed to fuel my determination. I was no longer that woman who had been betrayed. I was no longer defined by my marriage or the lies I had been fed. I had created something that was going to change everything, and I was going to make sure everyone in that room knew it. When it was finally my turn to present, I walked up to the stage with my head held high. The spotlight hit me, but instead of feeling the weight of the crowd's attention, I felt empowered. I began my presentation, outlining the potential of our quantum computing interface. As I spoke about the future of computing, I could see the audience leaning in, hanging on to every word I said. This was my moment, not just to prove my ideas, but to show the world who I truly was. "Today," I said, "we are launching a technology that will make quantum computing accessible to anyone, not just large corporations with unlimited resources. This is the future of computing, and it's available now." The crowd responded with murmurs of approval, and I could see the shift in the room. This was what they had been waiting for, a real breakthrough. But just as I was wrapping up my presentation, Jennifer stood up, interrupting with a pointed question. "Isn't this technology remarkably similar to what Thomas's company was developing before?" she asked, her voice sharp with accusation. She stood tall, trying to draw attention to herself. The crowd turned toward her, but I didn't flinch. I had expected this. I knew they would try to discredit me, to paint me as someone who had stolen their ideas. It was their last-ditch effort to derail me, but it wasn't going to work. Not this time. Before I could speak, James stepped forward. "Actually, let's address that," he said, his voice calm but assertive. He pulled up a slide that displayed the timeline of our research, showing that our work predated Thomas's company by nearly 2 years. The data was irrefutable, and it was clear to everyone in the room. Jennifer's face flushed red. "This is ridiculous," she muttered under her breath. But the damage had already been done. The truth was out, and it was clear that she had no real leg to stand on. I turned back to the audience, my voice steady as I continued. "We have the documentation to prove it. Our work is original, and we're proud of the impact it will have on the future." The crowd erupted into applause, and I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. But just as I was about to finish, I saw Thomas standing in the back, walking toward the stage. "Lillian!" he called out, his voice breaking through the noise. "Lillian, wait! I need to say something." I stopped, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment when Thomas would try to claim credit for everything. He had always underestimated me, always treated my work as secondary to his own. I wasn't going to let him do that again. I turned to face him, my voice clear and unwavering. "No, Thomas. You don't get to make this about you. Not anymore." He looked smaller than I remembered, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was wrong. I didn't see what you were capable of." I didn't respond immediately. I couldn't. The anger that had been building inside me since he left was finally starting to subside, replaced by something else, a quiet sense of closure. I had moved on, and I wasn't going to let him drag me back into his world of manipulation and deceit. "You should go," I said, turning away from him. "You've already taken enough." I turned back to the audience and finished my presentation. This was my time, my success, and nothing, not Thomas, not Jennifer, could take it away from me. After the presentation, I stood at the back of the room, my heart still racing, as investors rushed to meet me. The deals were already being made, and I could see the excitement in their eyes. It was happening. It was real. The technology we had worked so hard to develop was finally going to change the world. Lily came up to me, a proud smile on her face. "Mom, you were amazing." I hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of everything we had been through together. "We did it, Lily. This is just the beginning." As the event came to a close, I took a moment to look around the room. I had done it. I had built something that was mine, and nothing could take that away. The days after the tech conference blurred together. The excitement of the presentation, the rush of investors eager to back our project, and the congratulatory messages came flooding in. For the first time in years, I could breathe without the crushing weight of betrayal hanging over me. I had done it. I had proven not only to the world but to myself that I could build something extraordinary, something that couldn't be stolen or taken away. But just as quickly as the joy arrived, so did the challenges. The media was buzzing with the news of our revolutionary quantum computing interface, but there were still whispers, doubts, and undercurrents of envy. Jennifer and Thomas had managed to secure a small group of investors, and I could already see the ripple effect of their desperate attempts to undermine me. Jennifer was relentless, but I was done playing defense. It was time to finish this once and for all. I sat at my desk, reviewing the numbers on my laptop. We were moving forward with full speed. The funding was in place, and our team was ready to ramp up production. But then an email caught my eye. It was from Eva, one of the few people I could trust from the old days, before the drama with Thomas. She had been quiet for a while, and I hadn't heard from her since the conference. "Sophie, I just got word that Jennifer and Thomas are meeting with the board at your old company. They're trying to get them to pull support from your project. Be ready. I don't think they're done with you yet." I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. They were still at it, still trying to undermine everything I had worked for. But this time, I wasn't going to let them succeed. They had underestimated me before, and now I would show them that I could turn the tables. I dialed James's number. "James, we need to act fast. I just got word that Thomas and Jennifer are going to meet with the board at my old company. They're trying to sabotage us. We need to make sure this doesn't go any further." "Got it," James said. "I'll set up a meeting with our legal team and start making some calls. We won't let them get away with it." The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and preparations. We had to get ahead of their move, and fast. The board meeting at Thomas's company was scheduled for the next morning, and we had to be ready to counter any attempt they made to discredit our project or pull support from our investors. That night, as I was reviewing some final details for the presentation, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lily. "Mom, Dad's here. He's asking for you. Says it's urgent." My stomach sank. I hadn't heard from Thomas in weeks, and now, of all times, he was asking to speak with me. I hesitated for a moment, then sighed. I knew I had to face him sooner or later. The games he had played, the lies, the manipulation, it all needed to be settled. I quickly sent a text back. "Tell him I'll meet him, but only on my terms." The next afternoon, I arrived at the coffee shop where Thomas had insisted on meeting. I walked in, scanning the room for him. I spotted him at the far corner, looking smaller than I remembered, his shoulders slumped in defeat. When he saw me, he stood up, his expression one of nervous hope. "Sophie," he said, his voice unsteady, "I need to apologize. I've messed up. I was wrong about everything. About you, about us. I should have never left. I'm sorry for how I treated you." I took a deep breath and sat down across from him. I had heard these words before. They didn't mean anything now. The damage had been done, and no apology would fix the years of betrayal. Still, I had to be calm. I had to be clear. "Thomas," I said, my voice controlled, Your apology means nothing now. You chose to walk away from everything we built together. You made your choice, and I made mine." He looked at me with a mixture of regret and desperation. "I know, I was blinded by my own pride. I couldn't see how much you were capable of. You were always more than just my wife. You were always more than I gave you credit for." I looked at him, the weight of the past few months heavy on my chest. But I had moved on. I was no longer that woman who lived in his shadow. I had built something greater, something far more important than any marriage or relationship. It was time to let go of the past, for good. You made your choices, Thomas. I made mine. You have your life, and I have mine. I don't need your apology. I don't need anything from you anymore. I stood up to leave, but Thomas reached for my hand. "Please, Sophie," he said softly. "Can't we fix this?" I pulled my hand away, standing tall. "No, Thomas, we can't fix this. You destroyed everything when you walked away. Now I'm going to show you how I rebuilt it. You can't be part of that anymore." Without another word, I turned and walked out of the coffee shop. The finality of it hit me like a wave, but it wasn't the crushing pain I had expected. It was a relief. I had finally closed that chapter of my life. Back at the office, the pressure was mounting. The board meeting at Thomas's company was just hours away, and we still needed to prepare. I couldn't afford to lose focus now. I sat with James and our legal team, going over our strategy. "We're not just fighting for our company," I said, my voice steady. "We're fighting for everything that we've built. We have the evidence, we have the technology, and we have the backing of the right people. Let's make sure they know it." As the meeting approached, I could feel the nerves creeping in. But I had learned something over the past few months. Fear had no place in my life anymore. The only thing that mattered was moving forward. The meeting was intense. Thomas and Jennifer presented their case, but it was clear that they didn't have the support they thought they would. Our legal team had done their homework, and we had the upper hand. The evidence was undeniable. With every passing minute, I could see the realization sinking in for Thomas and Jennifer. They were losing. When the meeting concluded, it was official. Our project would continue without interference. Thomas's company had lost their bid to pull our support, and we had secured our place as the leaders in the industry. I had won. I had beaten them, not through revenge, but through the undeniable strength of what I had built. That evening, as I sat with Lily at dinner, I felt the weight of everything finally lift. "We did it, Mom," Lily said with a smile, her eyes shining with pride. "Yes," I said, looking at her, "we did." As I reflected on everything that had happened, I realized that this was more than just a victory over Thomas and Jennifer. It was a victory over the person I had been before. I had learned to trust myself, to fight for what I deserved, and most importantly, to never let anyone define my worth. The journey had been long and at times painful, but in the end, it had brought me exactly where I needed to be, free, successful, and ready to build the future I had always dreamed of. A few weeks after the conference, the momentum didn't slow down. Our quantum computing interface was on the verge of revolutionizing industries, and the company was growing at an astonishing pace. Investors were lining up, eager to be part of the next big thing. The excitement in the office was palpable as we worked together to expand and perfect our technology. But as I looked around, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the people who had stood by me when everything seemed impossible. Lily, James, Eva, and all the team members who had worked tirelessly alongside me. I had built more than just a successful startup. I had built a family of people who believed in the vision and in me. One evening, as I sat in my office, going through the final details of an upcoming press release, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Thomas. My heart sank, not because I was afraid, but because I knew what it meant. He had tried everything to hold me back, but now he was asking for a chance to make things right. "Sophie, I know I've ruined everything, but I'm asking you one last time to consider giving me a chance to help. I'm sorry for everything." I stared at the screen for a moment, the familiar rush of anger rising in my chest. But then, something changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need him in my life. The old me might have given him another chance, but the new me had learned that some things were better left in the past. I deleted the message without replying. I had moved on. My future wasn't tied to Thomas anymore. It was mine to create. The phone buzzed again. This time it was Lily. "Mom, you ready for tonight? We've got the celebration dinner, remember?" I smiled, my heart warm with pride. "Yes, sweetheart. Let's make it a night to remember." That evening, as we sat around the dinner table with friends and family, I realized that this was the life I had always dreamed of. Not just the success, but the people who had supported me through every challenge. The ones who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. The future was bright. I had found my strength, my purpose, and my happiness. And this was only the beginning.